Aim for safe enough to try over consensus. Building consensus could be really easy just by overpowering everyone in the meeting through authority or hierarchy. Or it could be really hard where you're just trying to integrate everyone's feedback and opinions, and so it just takes forever trying to integrate that, and eventually it just becomes very diluted, or it just doesn't become your decision anymore because you went for consensus and integrated everything that people said to integrate. What's cool about working in a remote environment is you have the opportunity to do things a little bit differently, and one of the things that you can do is reduce bias. An interesting way to reduce bias in decision making is for you to use more visual cues or use the chat rooms simultaneously. So one way to do that is ask for people's response by either a 5 or a fist, so that there's a visual cue that everybody responds to at the same time. And that allows the removal of bias in the sense that everybody isn't listening to other people's responses. There's an immediate response to a question that's posed. You could do that in face-to-face meetings, but it just seems a little bit more neutral to do it in a virtual meeting. Another thing I noticed about kind of remote work and even a virtual meeting, for some reason, building consensus in a virtual environment is much harder. And I think in many ways, it's a great opportunity to just think about how you might do things differently and allow for more voices to be heard. Perhaps it's just because people feel the comfort of their home, they're much more casual, there's a flattening of hierarchy in a virtual environment. It's easy for people to get disengaged. If they don't feel valued or heard, they just won't participate in a virtual meeting, or they may even just turn off their screen and just listen or not listen, who knows. But it's very obvious in a virtual meeting where it might not be as obvious in a face-to-face meeting. We are in a really unique place right now where with school closures, shelter in place, and the coronavirus, everyone is forced to work remotely right now, and actually everyone's very accepting of all of the imperfections that people are experiencing, like just not knowing how to use a Zoom meeting, or not being familiar with Slack, or not being familiar with sharing and collaborating on Google Docs. These are all things that many people are just encountering for the first time, or simply just not having enough bandwidth to handle video and chat and all of the online tools that you actually need these days. Another thing to remember is right now, no one has the right answer. This is the first time all of us are experiencing something like this in our life. Information is coming to us at a very fast rate, and these are massive decisions that we're having to make that often impact our whole team or a whole community. The amount of decisions and the changes that we're making right now is kind of overwhelming. And this is why it's so essential that we don't fall into the trap of consensus building. So in a time of this kind of uncertainty, it's really essential that we move away from consensus building and we really focus on the types of decisions that need to be made, and be really clear with our teams what kinds of decisions need to be made. And so there are 5 types of decisions that I often talk about. So the first one is tell, and that's obvious, where I made a decision. I'm just telling you what decisions I made so that you can make informed decisions yourself based on that. The second kind of decision is consult, and this is where I'm seeking advice from the group. I'm actually getting consultation from the group, but ultimately I still need to make a decision. And so I'm not going to integrate all of your advice, but I'm actually just consulting you. And then from there, I'm going to try to make a more informed decision. I would say agree is more like the consensus piece. And this is the one that, I think is tough, but sometimes you do need to use consensus. And if you were going to do it, use it sparingly, and also try to implement it in a way there's bias reduction. Observe and advise is, in fact, it's not my decision. I'm trying to influence someone else's decision. And so I'm listening to certain things and I'm kind of whispering in someone's ear that here are some things that I've observed. And so I'm advising them. And oftentimes in this scenario, I'm pretty explicit about it. I'm just like, hey, I want you to make this decision, but I want to help you think about some other things that your decision might impact, just because you don't have that context, or you might not have that experience. And so I'm providing you with some expertise, and I'm pretty open about that. And then the last thing is just to delegate. And delegate just means that like you decided you don't want to make the decision, and you're going to hand that off to somebody else so that they can make the decision in an autonomous fashion. So the whole point of these tips are so that you can actually make decisions faster, try new things, experiment, get data back, and learn from that. That's why I'm pushing you not to focus on consensus building, but actually aim for safe enough to try. This is Anthony Kim. Like I always say, don't compare your insides with other people's outsides. Peace.